"Step away from the child." Mila Collins did not shout, but her voice carried across the Bellagio Grand Ballroom with enough force to interrupt the orchestra. 4 elegantly dressed guests stood around a boy near the edge of the dance floor. He looked no older than 8. His formal black coat was too perfect for someone so small, yet one silver button hung loose, and his hands shook as he gathered the broken pieces of a wooden horse from the marble floor. A crystal glass lay on its side beside him, spilling dark red wine across a white tablecloth. Hundreds of guests watched. No one moved. Mila lowered her serving tray onto the nearest table. At the beginning of her shift, her supervisor had given the staff 3 rules. Keep your eyes down. Never interfere with a guest. Leave unusual matters to security. Mila broke all 3 before she had time to reconsider. "He dropped a glass," she said. "That does not give 4 adults the right to surround him." The tallest guest turned toward her. His face was pale beneath the chandelier light, almost too smooth, and his grey eyes held no trace of embarrassment. "Return to your duties?" "Not until you give him space." A quiet murmur moved through the ballroom. Mila heard silk shifting, glasses settling onto tables, and someone whispering that the waitress had lost her mind. Perhaps she had. These people wore watches worth more than her yearly rent and carried themselves as if the entire hotel belonged to them. But the boy was crying without making a sound. That mattered more. Mila stepped between him and the strangers, then crouched beside him. Up close she saw shadows beneath his eyes and a faint silver discoloration around his left wrist. His breathing came too quickly. Frost formed beneath his shoes, spreading over the marble in delicate white lines. The nearest guests backed away. Mila did not. "Look at me," she said softly. The boy raised his eyes. They were pale grey and filled with a fear too old for his young face. "Slow breath. In through your nose, out through your mouth." He tried, his breath caught. Mila removed her black server's jacket and placed it around his narrow shoulders. "Again, you are not alone." The frost stopped spreading. One of the guests stared at the floor, disappointed rather than relieved. He was supposed to prove himself tonight. Mila looked up. "Prove what?" No one answered. The tall guest reached toward her shoulder. Before his hand could close around it, every candle in the ballroom went dark. The orchestra fell silent. A cold pressure swept through the room deeper than winter, and the great doors opened. White light spilled across the marble. A man stood in the entrance wearing a black suit and a silver ring. He appeared to be in his mid-30s, but nothing about him felt young. His skin was white, his face even paler, and his dark hair-framed features controlled into perfect stillness. His eyes fixed on the boy, silver changed to crimson. Upstairs, Giovanni Bellagio had felt a sudden surge of cold race through the hotel's stone foundation. He had left the council chamber before the guards could explain it. Now he crossed the ballroom in silence, each measured step causing another guest to bow, then another. Within seconds, the entire room had lowered its head. Mila remained beside the child because she did not understand who had entered. Giovanni stopped several feet away. His gaze moved from the broken toy to the overturned glass, then to the silver mark around the boy's wrist. Something in his expression hardened. He lifted the fallen glass and brought it close enough to catch its scent. His eyes darkened. Who served him this? No one spoke. The 4 guests who had surrounded the child lowered themselves to one knee. "Your Majesty," the tallest began, "there has been a misunderstanding." Giovanni looked at him. "You will speak when I ask you a question." His voice was quiet, but the chandeliers trembled overhead. He turned toward the boy, Julian. The child did not run to him. Instead, he reached for Mila's hand and held on. The reaction that passed through the ballroom was immediate. Shock, fear, recognition. Giovanni stared at their joined hands, then at the fading frost around his son's shoes. When he spoke again, every word landed like a locked door. "Seal the hotel. No guest leaves, no staff member leaves. Bring the royal physician to my son." Guards appeared along every exit. Mila's pulse hammered as the truth finally settled over her. The frightened child leaning against her was Prince Julian Bellagio, heir to a hidden vampire throne, and the pale man standing before her, looking at the silver mark on his son's wrist as if he had just discovered a betrayal inside his own home, was Giovanni Bellagio, the vampire king. Mila had stepped between a crying boy and 4 powerful strangers because everyone else had chosen to look away. Now she understood what that single act of kindness had pulled her into. The royal physician arrived less than 2 minutes later, carrying a narrow black case and wearing the rigid expression of a man who understood that one careless word could change the entire night. Giovanni did not step away from Julian. Mila did not either. The boy still held her hand beneath the folds of her server's jacket, his fingers cold enough to make hers ache, but she kept her grip steady and counted each breath with him. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. The frost around his shoes softened into water. "Examine the mark," Giovanni ordered. The physician knelt and gently raised Julian's left sleeve. The silver discoloration around the child's wrist caught the chandelier light like a thin ring of moonlight beneath his skin. The physician's face tightened, not with guilt. With concern, he opened his case, removed a small lens, and studied the mark without touching it. "This is not consistent with an ordinary loss of control," he said. "Can you identify it?" Giovanni asked. "Not here. I need proper instruments and a clean sample." Glanced toward the overturned glass on the floor. The dark red liquid had stopped inches from Mila's shoe. "Take the glass to the laboratory, seal it. No one handles it except you." 2 royal guards moved forward at once. The tallest noble lifted his head slightly from where he knelt. "Your Majesty," the boy became emotional. "That is all. There is no reason to confine every guest over a minor disturbance." Giovanni turned toward him. "My son is not a minor disturbance." The words were quiet. The noble lowered his head again. Mila looked around the ballroom and finally understood why no one had dared to help Julian. These people were not frightened by anger. They were frightened by control. Giovanni did not need to shout. He spoke as if the room had already agreed to obey him. The physician reached toward Julian, intending to guide him upstairs. The boy recoiled. His mouth opened, but no sound came. He shook his head and tightened both hands around Mila's fingers. A ripple of surprise moved through the guests. Giovanni saw it. His crimson eyes shifted from Julian's face to Mila's hand. "He does not want to go with strangers," Mila said. "The physician is not a stranger, maybe not to you." The room fell still again. Mila knew she had crossed another invisible line, but Julian's breathing had started to quicken. She turned to him instead of the king. "Would you like me to walk with you?" Julian nodded once. Giovanni watched his son for a long moment, then stepped aside. It was a small gesture, almost nothing, but several nobles stared as though they had witnessed something impossible. The vampire king had made room for a waitress. Mila rose carefully. Her shoes slipped against the melted frost, and Giovanni lifted one hand as though he meant to steady her. He stopped before touching her. "Your name," he said. "Mila Collins." He repeated it once, softly, as if placing it somewhere he would not forget. The private elevator opened at the end of the ballroom. Mila walked beside Julian while the physician followed. Giovanni entered last. The doors closed, cutting off the bowed nobles, the sealed exits, and the hundreds of eyes still fixed on them. The elevator hummed upward. That quiet, mechanical sound carried Mila back to the moment she had first seen Julian 6 hours earlier. She had arrived through the employee entrance with a thrift store purse, a paper cup of cold coffee, and a reminder on her phone that the final payment on the personal loan she had taken out during her foster mother's last months of care was due in 3 days. The private event offered double pay and overtime. Mila had expected wealthy guests, impossible requests, and aching feet. She had not expected hallways that felt colder whenever certain people passed. She had not expected guests who never touched the food and seemed to move without making a sound. Near the West Service corridor, she had found Julian standing alone beside a tall window, holding the same wooden horse that now lay broken downstairs. One of its wheels had fallen off and rolled near Mila's shoe. She had picked it up, fastened it back into place with a small hairpin, and handed the toy to him. "There," she had said. "Not perfect, but it should hold." Julian had looked at her without speaking. When he reached for the horse, his sleeve had slipped back, revealing the silver mark around his wrist. "Does that hurt?" Mila had asked. His eyes had moved toward the ballroom doors. Fear had crossed his face so quickly she almost missed it. Then he covered the mark and walked away. Her supervisor had called her back before she could follow. Now in the elevator, Julian leaned against her side while Giovanni stood across from them, pale and perfectly still. Mila remembered the direction of the boy's frightened glance. He had not been afraid of the ballroom itself. He had been afraid of someone waiting inside it. The elevator opened onto the 47th floor, where the gold and marble of the hotel gave way to dark wood, silver lamps, and a silence that felt protected by something older than locks. 2 attendants waited outside a pair of double doors, but Giovanni stopped them with one raised hand. "No one enters without my permission." Mila followed the physician into a private medical suite overlooking the city. Julian still held her hand beneath the folds of her server's jacket. His fingers remained cold, but his breathing had steadied. The physician guided him toward a narrow bed. Julian sat only after Mila sat beside him. Giovanni remained near the windows, his pale face reflected faintly in the glass. He looked perfectly still, but his right hand had closed so tightly that the silver ring on his finger pressed into his skin. The physician checked Julian's eyes, listened to his breathing, and studied the silver mark around his wrist. "The sealed glass has been delivered to the laboratory," he said. "My assistant has begun the analysis." "How long?" Giovanni asked. 30 minutes for a preliminary result. Send it directly to me." The physician bowed and moved into the adjoining laboratory. Mila looked down at Julian. The boy's eyes were closed, but his hand remained wrapped around two of her fingers. "He looks exhausted," she said. Giovanni's gaze shifted toward his son. His reports claimed he had been sleeping normally. Those reports were wrong. The words left Mila before caution could stop them. The room grew quiet. Giovanni did not rebuke her. He looked at the shadows beneath Julian's eyes as though seeing them clearly for the first time. A guard appeared outside the open doorway. "Your Majesty, Mr. Alden requests permission to enter." "He carries a message from the council." Giovanni nodded once. A grey-haired advisor entered and lowered his head. "The council demands an explanation for the lockdown. Lady Seraphine says the delay could be interpreted as weakness." Giovanni's expression did not change. The lamp beside him flickered. "Tell Lady Seraphine that concern for my son is not weakness. She also claims the prince's appearance was authorized by the royal office." Giovanni turned fully toward him. "I gave no such authorization." The advisor hesitated. The schedule carried an authentic seal. Then Giovanni's voice became quieter. "Who delivered it?" "A member of the household staff. We are identifying him now. Find him. Seal the service corridors. Review every entrance used tonight." The advisor bowed, but Giovanni stopped him before he reached the door. "Who has controlled Julian's daily household reports?" "The Palace Education Office and the Appointed Care Committee." "Names. They will be on your desk within 10 minutes. After the advisor left, Mila studied Giovanni. "Someone has been deciding what you're allowed to know about your own son." His crimson eyes settled on her. "You speak boldly for someone inside a locked vampire court." "I spent years serving people who believed staff members were invisible. Invisible people notice everything." Something shifted behind Giovanni's controlled expression. Respect, perhaps. It vanished when Julian moved in his sleep and turned his face away from the doorway. Giovanni stepped closer, then stopped several feet from the bed. He could command an entire ballroom, yet he did not seem certain that his son would welcome him. Less than 20 minutes earlier, Giovanni had stood in a private council chamber while 12 vampire nobles discussed Julian's future as if the child were a disputed inheritance. Lady Seraphine Voss had sat at the far end of the table in a silver gown, her posture calm and a voice colder than the crystal glasses before her. "The prince is 8 years old," she had said. "He has shown no fangs, no stable transformation, and no control over his inherited gift. The court requires proof that he can carry the crown." "The court requires patience," Giovanni had answered, "not public humiliation." Seraphine had proposed the awakening rite, an ancient ceremony designed to force dormant vampire power to the surface. Giovanni had refused. "My son will not be tested for your entertainment." A crystal glass beneath his hand had cracked with a thin, sharp sound. No one at the table had spoken after that. Then a guard had rushed in with news of an intruder near the East Service entrance. Giovanni had left immediately. The warning had been false. By the time he sensed Julian's power moving through the hotel, the boy had already been brought before an audience prepared to watch him fail. Back in the medical suite, Giovanni looked toward the closed laboratory door, the forged authorization, the false security warning, the misleading health reports. They were not separate mistakes. They were parts of the same design. Mila followed his gaze. "You know who arranged it." "I know who benefits from it," he said. At that moment, the laboratory door opened. The physician stood there, holding a clear vial that had turned the color of smoke. His face had lost all professional calm. "Your Majesty," he said. "Someone has been putting something into the prince's blood for months." The physician held the smoky vial beneath the light. "The substance in the glass matches the residue beneath the prince's skin," he said. "Whatever this is, tonight was not his first exposure." Giovanni's face became still in a way that frightened Mila more than anger would have. "How long?" "I cannot determine that. Without a blood sample and his medical records." The physician looked toward Julian. "The test will be small, but he must remain calm." Julian opened his eye. His fingers tightened around Mila's hand. Frost appeared along the metal edge of the bed. Mila leaned closer. "You are safe. Stay with my voice." Julian watched her instead of the physician. 4 seconds in. The frost stopped. The physician collected the sample carefully, sealed it, and carried it into the laboratory. Giovanni moved to the bedside, but Julian lowered his eyes. The space between father and son felt wider than the room. "Who brought him the drink?" Giovanni asked. The ballroom returned in fragments, crystal glasses, silver trays, white gloves, guests moving between tables while the orchestra played. "It was not one of my trays," she said. "How can you be certain?" The service staff carried round trays with black cloth beneath the glasses. The one near Julian was rectangular and lined with silver. Giovanni looked toward the door. "Royal service." "Maybe. But the person carrying it wore the same black uniform as the hotel staff." Mila closed her eyes, rebuilding the scene the way she rebuilt a crowded dining room after an order went missing. He came through the west entrance. He did not check table numbers. He already knew where he was going. "Would you reckon from the side, dark hair, about 6 feet tall, white gloves." He kept his chin down. Giovanni called for Mr. Alden. The advisor entered within seconds. "Bring every member of the hotel staff who entered through the west ballroom doors during the last hour," Giovanni said. "Separate them before questioning. No one is to be threatened." Mr. Alden bowed and left. Mila noticed the final instruction. Giovanni wanted truth, not fear. The private telephone on the wall rang once. An attendant answered, listened, then looked toward the king. "The council requests permission to send a representative upstairs." Denied. "Lady Seraphine claims Miss Collins may have interfered with the prince before the incident." Mila felt Julian's hand tense. Giovanni saw it. "Tell the council that Miss Collins prevented a public crisis while they watched," he said. "If they wish to discuss interference, they may begin with their own silence." The attendant lowered his head and carried the message away. Julian's breathing had changed. Not faster, shallower. His eyes remained fixed on the doorway. Mila followed his gaze. "Was someone wearing silver near you tonight?" she asked gently. Giovanni looked at her, but he did not interrupt. Julian did not answer. Mila tried again. "A silver dress, a silver pin, something shaped like a flower." The child's face lost what little color it had. The water glass on the bedside table turned cloudy with ice. Giovanni moved one step forward. Julian flinched. Giovanni stopped immediately. Mila kept her voice soft. "You do not have to tell us. Just squeeze my hand if you remember." Julian squeezed once. Mila looked at Giovanni. Someone frightened him before the nobles surrounded him. The physician returned with the sealed blood sample. "I need his previous reports for comparison." Giovanni's expression darkened. "You will have every report before the hour ends." A guard entered and handed Mr. Alden's written list to the king. Only 7 staff members had used the west doors. 6 were already being held downstairs. The 7th name belonged to no registered employee. Mila studied the description beneath it. Black uniform, white gloves, silver service tray, a small embroidered rose near the collar. Her memory sharpened. Before the man approached Julian, a woman had spoken to him beside a mirrored column. Mila had seen only the woman's shoulder and the pale gleam of a brooch, a silver rose. "I saw that symbol," Mila said. Giovanni lifted his eyes from the page. "Where?" "On the woman who gave him the tray." Silence settled over the medical suite. Giovanni folded the list once, precise and slow. "Bring me every guest who wore a silver rose tonight." The silver rose emblems were collected in a conference room 2 floors below the medical suite, far from Julian and under the watch of 6 royal guards. Giovanni did not allow the suspects near his son. Instead, each emblem was photographed, sealed, and matched against the guest registry, recorded every step. Only Lady Seraphine Voss was permitted upstairs, and even then she stopped beyond the protective line marked across the floor. "You asked to speak with me," she said. Her voice was calm. Her silver gown caught the light, but she remained beside Julian's bed. The boy's hand rested inside hers, cold but steady. The moment Seraphine entered, his eyes moved toward her. His breathing changed. Not panic, recognition, Giovanni noticed. "Where is the silver rose you wore during the council meeting?" he asked. Seraphine did not hesitate. "In my suite, unless one of your guards has already removed it. Your suite is being sealed under the Royal Emergency Statute. 2 neutral witnesses will be present during the search." "You are searching council rooms because a hotel employee remembers a brooch? I am preserving evidence because someone exposed my son to an unknown substance." Seraphine glanced toward Julian. "Then I welcome a complete investigation. However, the girl should also be questioned. She had contact with the prince before the ballroom incident." Mila felt every eye turned toward her. Giovanni did not. He kept his gaze on Seraphine. "Miss Collins has already provided a statement. She prevented Julian's condition from becoming worse, or she knew how to calm a reaction she expected." Julian's fingers tightened. Frost touched the edge of the water glass. Mila bent closer. "Stay with my voice," she whispered. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. His gaze returned to her. The frost stopped before it could spread. Seraphine watched with an expression Mila could not read. Giovanni stepped between her and the bed. No one will use my son's fear as an argument for removing him from my care. The council has a duty to protect the succession. Then the council should help me discover who placed him in danger. Before Seraphine could answer, the laboratory door opened. The physician entered holding 2 sealed reports. Your Majesty, the substance in the prince's blood is identical to the residue found in the glass. The concentration indicates more than 1 exposure, but I will need his earlier medical records before I can estimate the duration. Giovanni accepted the report. What does it do? It does not create his ability. It disrupts the body's control over it. Fear, exhaustion, and public pressure would intensify the effect. Silence settled over the suite. Mila remembered the nobles waiting around Julian instead of helping him. They had not been surprised when the frost appeared. They had been waiting for it. They wanted everyone to see him lose control, she said. Seraphine looked at her. That is speculation. Then why did no one call for help? Mila asked. Why did they stand around him as if they were watching a test? Giovanni's eyes darkened. He turned to Mr. Alden, who had entered with a folder of staff records. What have you found? 6 employees who used the West Ballroom entrance have been verified. The 7th man was not employed by the hotel. His uniform was taken from a storage room shortly before the event. Who gave him access? The camera outside the storage room failed for 11 minutes. Mr. Alden placed a photograph on the table. It showed the rectangular silver tray Mila remembered. Near one corner lay a tiny thread of pale fabric embroidered with part of a flower. Not enough to identify a person. Enough to confirm that Mila had seen something real. Seraphine studied the photograph, then looked back at Giovanni. Several families use the silver rose during formal gatherings. You cannot treat tradition as guilt. I have not named anyone guilty, Giovanni said. Not yet. The physician opened Julian's archived reports. His expression tightened as he turned the pages. These records state that the prince slept 8 hours each night and showed no recurring silver marks. Mila looked at the exhausted child beside her. That cannot be true. Giovanni took the file. Every page carried an official signature from the Palace Care Committee. Someone had hidden Julian's condition behind perfect numbers and approved reports. Seraphine's calm expression finally shifted, but only slightly. Then your household has failed you. Giovanni closed the folder. My household has lied to me. Julian stirred. His lips parted, but no sound came at first. Mila kept her hand still inside his. The physician watched him with sudden hope. Giovanni did not move. The whole room seemed to wait. Then Julian looked directly at Mila and whispered one word, faint but clear. Mila. Giovanni's face lost its perfect control. Mr. Alden lowered his eyes. Even Seraphine went silent. For the first time in nearly 2 years, Giovanni Bellagio had chosen to speak a name, and it belonged to the waitress who had refused to look away. Julian's whispered name lingered in the room long after the sound faded. Mila felt his hand relax inside hers, as if speaking had taken more strength than anyone realized. The physician stopped beside the laboratory door. Mr. Alden lowered the folder in his hands. Giovanni stared at his son with an expression Mila had not seen before. Not power, not anger. Wonder. Julian, he said softly. The boy did not answer. His eyes closed and his breathing settled into a fragile rhythm. Giovanni did not ask him to speak again. Everyone out except the physician and Miss Collins, he ordered. Seraphine remained beyond the protective line near the door. The council will require a formal report. The council receive verified facts. Giovanni's gaze hardened. You will return to your suite and remain inside the sealed hotel under royal observation. Seraphine looked toward Mila. A human employee should not have unrestricted access to the royal heir. Her presence is stabilizing his condition, Giovanni replied. She remains under my authority and the physician's supervision. Seraphine inclined her head. Then I hope your judgment proves sound. The doors closed behind her. The pressure in the suite eased, but only slightly. The physician adjusted the blanket around Julian and checked the monitor beside the bed. His temperature is stable. The substance is still interfering with his control, but he is no longer in immediate danger. Can you remove it? Giovanni asked. Not until I identify the compound. I can prevent further exposure and support his body, but I will not risk an untested treatment. Use every resource you need. The physician carried the reports back into the laboratory. Mila waited until Julian's breathing deepened, then gently freed one hand and crossed toward the windows. Giovanni followed, stopping several feet from the bed so their voices would not carry. The city shone beneath them, 47 stories below, bright and unaware. He said your name, Giovanni said. I heard him. He has not spoken anyone's name since his mother died. Mila looked back at Julian. Maybe he needed to feel safe first. Giovanni's silver eyes moved to her. Do you believe he was not safe with Mila? Chose each word carefully. I believe someone used the distance between you. The lamps flickered once. Explain. His reports were false. His schedule was changed without your approval. Someone brought him into that ballroom and expected you to be somewhere else. They believed they could control what you knew about your own son. Giovanni turned toward the glass. His reflection looked colder than the man beside her. You are saying I failed him. I am saying they found a weakness that was already there. For several seconds he said nothing. Then his voice changed. It lost the weight of the throne. The distance was already there. Mila saw it then, not indifference, grief, a father who had mistaken silence for rejection because he was afraid of hearing the truth. Then close it, she said. Giovanni looked toward the bed. Slowly, he crossed the room and sat in the chair on Julian's opposite side. He did not reach for him. He simply stayed close enough to be seen when the boy woke. A knock sounded at the outer door. Mr. Alden entered with 2 sealed envelopes. The first searches are complete. No prohibited substances were found in the council suites. Lady Seraphine Silverrose was located in a locked jewelry case, as she claimed. Giovanni accepted the report. That clears no one. No, Your Majesty. It only proves the substance was not stored in the guest rooms. Mr. Alden opened the second envelope. There is another issue. The signatures on Julian's medical reports are authentic, but 3 physicians listed in those records insist they never examined him on those dates. Who approved the reports? Giovanni asked. The Palace Care Committee. 3 members, the Royal Household Administrator, the Medical Records Director, and 1 representative appointed by the Vampire Council. Names. Mr. Alden handed him a page. Giovanni read it once. Bring them in separately, quietly. Do not alert the court. There is also the false employee. Security recovered the stolen uniform from a laundry chute. He used an unregistered service elevator and entered the maintenance levels before the hotel was sealed. Mila frowned. Then he knew the building, or someone taught him the route, Giovanni said. Mr. Alden bowed and left. Julian shifted beneath the blanket. His eyes opened slowly and found Giovanni sitting beside him. For one suspended moment, father and son only stared at each other. Then Julian moved one hand from beneath the blanket and placed it on the mattress between them. Giovanni understood. He rested his own hand nearby, leaving a small space. Julian moved his fingers across that space until they touched his father's. Giovanni's ancient stillness broke for one brief second. Outside the suite, the court was searching for someone to blame. Inside, a child had begun repairing what their silence had nearly destroyed. The first member of the Palace Care Committee arrived shortly after midnight. Eleanor Price, the Royal Household Administrator, entered the medical suite with her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She stopped when she saw Julian awake beside Giovanni, their fingers still touching on the mattress. Your Majesty, she said, Mr. Alden told me the reports had been questioned. Giovanni remained seated. Who prepared my son's weekly health summaries? The Medical Records Office compiled them. I reviewed the documents and applied the household seal. Did you compare them with the original examination notes? Eleanor lowered her eyes. No, the physician's signatures had already been verified through the internal system. Giovanni placed 3 copied reports on the table. Those physicians never examined Julian. Eleanor's face went pale. She looked less like a conspirator than someone realizing that months of carelessness had consequences. That should not have been possible. Mr. Alden opened a personnel file. The reports were delivered by a clerk named Thomas Reed. Yes, Eleanor said. He had an active identification card and medical wing clearance. Thomas Reed does not exist, Mr. Alden replied. Someone created a complete employee record using administrator access. The file was deleted from the system 11 minutes after the hotel was sealed. The room became very quiet. Giovanni's gaze hardened. How long did you accept reports from him? 7 months. Julian's fingers shifted against his father's hand. Mila watched Giovanni absorb the answer without allowing anger to control him. The laboratory door opened, and the physician entered carrying 2 sealed folders. Your Majesty, the Royal Archive stores Julian's quarterly blood samples beneath separate security seals. The sample from 8 months ago was clear. The sample taken 3 months ago contains traces of the same compound found tonight. Then the exposure began sometime between those dates, Giovanni said. Yes, the current concentration also suggests repeated low doses rather than a single event. Mila looked toward Julian, something he received regularly. Eleanor nodded slowly. His meals came from the royal kitchen. His lessons were held in the East Wing. Every night he received a restorative blood tonic for sleep. Who approved it? Giovanni asked. The care committee accepted a medical recommendation submitted through the council representative. Mr. Alden checked the file. Lord Marcus Vale. Mila remembered him immediately. He had stood near Julian in the ballroom, watching the frost spread with the stillness of someone waiting for a result. Giovanni rose. Bring him to the council chamber. Mr. Alden hesitated. His suite is empty. The hotel is sealed. His guards say he entered after the search and never came out. The windows remain locked. The hallway cameras show no departure. Mila thought of the false employee and the route beneath the hotel. The unregistered service elevator. Mr. Alden nodded. Security believes it reaches the old maintenance levels. Giovanni's eyes turned crimson, but his voice remained controlled. Find Vale. Do not assume he is guilty. Determine whether he used the passage willingly or whether someone wanted us to believe he did. Julian moved beneath the blanket and looked toward the broken wooden horse on the bedside table. One side had split when the nobles crushed it in the ballroom, leaving a narrow seam along its hollow body. The boy lifted one trembling finger and pointed. Mila followed his gaze. Giovanni picked up the toy and carefully separated the loosened wooden panel. A folded strip of yellowed paper rested within the hollow space. He removed it and opened it beneath the lamp. A hand-drawn map showed the hotel's original foundation, including a passage connecting the royal wing to an abandoned chapel underground. In one corner, someone had drawn a small silver rose. Mila studied Giovanni's face. Do you recognize the handwriting? Elena? He said. The name barely left his lips. Julian's mother had hidden the map inside the toy before her death. The private telephone rang. Mr. Alden answered, listened, then turned back. Security found Lord Vale's signet ring beside the underground entrance. They also recovered 4 empty tonic bottles. The royal batch numbers match bottles delivered to Julian's rooms. Eleanor covered her mouth. Giovanni folded Elena's map with careful hands. The evidence connects Vale to the passage, he said. It does not tell us whether he was placed inside it. Another guard appeared at the doorway carrying a tablet. Your Majesty, we found Lord Vale. Giovanni looked up. Where? Inside the abandoned chapel. He is alive, but someone locked him behind the inner gate. Mila felt the truth shift beneath everything they thought they knew. Lord Vale had approved the tonic. His ring had been found beside the passage, yet someone had also made certain he could not escape. Giovanni looked at the silver rose on Elena's map. This did not begin tonight, he said. Someone has been preparing it for years. Lord Marcus Vale was brought to a secured sitting room across from the medical suite, where Julian could not hear the questioning. Giovanni allowed Mila to remain because she was the only witness who had watched Vale during the ballroom incident, and the physician had warned that Julian's condition worsened whenever she stayed away too long. Vale stood beneath the silver lamps with dust across his formal coat and a grey hotel blanket around his shoulders. His signet ring and the recovered tonic bottles rested inside separate evidence cases on the table. You approved the nightly tonic, Giovanni said. Vale looked at the sealed bottles. I approved a medical recommendation carrying a verified royal seal. The physician whose name appeared on it never signed the order. Vale closed his eyes for 1 second. Then someone used my authority. Mr. Alden placed Vale's communication device beside the evidence cases. This device received the message that led you into the chapel. It claimed a member of the care committee wanted to confess, Vale said. I followed the directions through the service elevator. The inner gate locked after I entered. The message came through the council network, Mr. Alden said. We have preserved the system logs and frozen every administrator account before more records can be deleted. Mila studied Vale. Why were you watching Julian in the ballroom? Vale's expression tightened. I was told the prince would complete an informal demonstration of control while he was surrounded and crying. I did not know fear was part of the plan. Mila held his gaze. You still watched. Shame crossed his face. Giovanni's voice became colder. You may have been deceived, Lord Vale, but your silence helped them. Vale lowered his head. He was returned to a guarded suite, neither cleared nor accused. When the door closed, Mr. Alden unlocked a tablet. The hotel remains physically sealed, but the council's encrypted communication network was never disconnected. Anonymous messages are spreading through it now. The screen filled with accusations. A human waitress had manipulated the prince. Giovanni had imprisoned noble families because of her. Mila had placed the substance in Julian's drink so she could pretend to save him. Then another message appeared. It contained Mila's full name, her apartment address, and details from the background screening used to approve temporary staff for the private event. Her loan balance was listed beneath them. Mila felt the room narrow around her. Someone accessed the screening contractor's files. Mr. Alden nodded. The same administrator credentials that created Thomas Reed's false employee record were used to enter the contractor's system. Giovanni's eyes turned crimson. Remove her address from every royal file. Send protection to her apartment. Have our legal office notify the contractor and the lender that her records were accessed unlawfully. You cannot order every person in this court to stop believing a lie, Mila said. No, Giovanni replied, but I can prevent the lie from reaching your door. And when they say your protection proves I control you, you are not leaving. The words came out like a royal command. Mila's expression hardened. Giovanni caught himself, his voice lowered. Julian needs stability tonight. After that, the decision belongs to you. Mila watched him for a moment. A king who had ruled through certainty had just corrected himself because she deserved a choice. Mr. Alden turned the tablet toward them. The council has demanded a formal hearing at sunrise. They want Miss Collins questioned before neutral witnesses. They want her separated from Julian, Giovanni said. Then let them question me, Mila replied. I will tell them exactly what I saw. She counted the details aloud, refusing to let rumor change them. The false server entered through the west ballroom doors. His tray was rectangular and lined with silver. Moments before he approached Julian, Mila saw him speaking beside a mirrored column with someone wearing a silver rose. She had not seen the tray exchanged. She would not claim that she had. Giovanni looked at her with quiet approval. Truth does not become weaker because it is precise. A soft sound came from the medical suite. Mila returned to Julian's bedside and found him awake, holding the broken wooden horse against his chest. He pushed it toward her, then pointed at the loosened panel. Beneath Elena Bellagio's initials, carved directly into the wood, was a single letter. V. Giovanni stared at it. Vale, Voss. Two powerful names already stood inside the investigation. The letter proved nothing, but Elena had hidden it beside a map marked with the silver rose. Someone had known the chapel mattered years before Julian was poisoned. Before Giovanni could speak, Mr. Alden's device sounded. He read the new message once, then looked toward the king. The anonymous account has issued a demand. Miss Collins must be surrendered to the council before sunrise, or every sealed medical record concerning Prince Julian will be released to the entire vampire court. Julian heard Mila's name. His fingers closed around hers. This time, when he looked toward the door, the fear in his eyes was not for himself. At sunrise, 3 neutral magistrates opened the hearing inside a sealed council chamber on the 45th floor. Giovanni attended as Julian's father and as king, but he did not preside, vote, or decide Mila's status. A royal legal advocate stood several feet behind Mila while she faced the council in the same black uniform she had worn all night. Julian remained in the secured medical suite 2 floors above, guarded by the physician and a rotating team whose names had been verified twice. His exact location had not been disclosed to the nobles. Mila Collins, the senior magistrate, said, "Did you place any substance in Prince Julian's drink?" "No." "Did you know how his power would react before the ballroom incident?" "No." "Then how did you calm him when trained members of the royal household could not?" Mila kept her voice steady. "I did not control his power. I helped a frightened child slow his breathing." A murmur moved through the chamber. Lady Seraphine Voss sat in the first row beside Lord Marcus Vale, who remained under observation. Seraphine's expression was calm. "Compassion is not proof of innocence," she said. "Neither is suspicion proof of guilt," replied. Mr. Alden displayed the ballroom records. Mila described only what she had witnessed. The false server entered through the west doors. His tray was rectangular and lined with silver. Moments before he approached Julian, Mila saw him speaking near a mirrored columns. "Can you identify that person?" the magistrate asked. "No. I saw a pale sleeve and the brooch. I did not see a face." Several nobles shifted. Mila refused to fill the silence with a guess. "Truth does not become stronger because I add something I cannot prove." Giovanni watched her without speaking. Seraphine rose. "Then her testimony establishes only that a common emblem appeared in a crowded ballroom. It establishes the tray's route and the false employee's contact," the magistrate said. "That is relevant evidence." Mr. Alden entered through a side door carrying a sealed tablet. "We traced the administrator access used to create Thomas Reed's identity and obtain Miss Collins's screening records. The activity passed through a private relay room on this floor. Only 7 senior council accounts could authorize that relay. Every device in the chamber was surrendered for examination. Seraphine placed hers. No one was accused. No one was cleared." One magistrate turned toward Giovanni. "Your Majesty, do you wish to make a statement?" Giovanni stood. Mila Collins is a protected witness because someone exposed her address and attempted to silence her. That protection is temporary security, not a judgment from this court. Her innocence or guilt will be determined by evidence. Seraphine looked at him. And if the anonymous account releases Julian's medical records, then the person who threatened a child's privacy will answer for that crime as well. A warning tone interrupted the hearing. Mr. Alden checked his device. His face changed. Cloud access in the Royal Medical Wing. Giovanni was already moving. The magistrates suspended the hearing, and the chamber doors opened under guard. Seraphine was still in her seat when the alarm began. Mila saw that clearly. She ran beside Giovanni toward the private elevator. By the time they reached the medical suite, the physician and 2 guards were locked inside the adjoining laboratory. They were unharmed but could not override the security doors. Another guard stood in the hall, holding a forged order bearing Giovanni's seal. The message had instructed him to report downstairs for an emergency rotation. "I verified the seal twice," he said. "It was authentic." Giovanni took the order. "The seal is real." Not. Julian's bed was empty. The broken wooden horse was gone. Behind the headboard, a section of dark paneling had opened onto a narrow stone staircase. A carved recess in the wall matched the shape of the wooden horse. Elena's gift had not merely hidden a map, it had been the key. The physician explained that the room's ventilation had suddenly activated at full strength, covering the sound while the laboratory doors locked. Julian must have approached the wall after hearing someone call from the passage. Giovanni looked down the steps. "Who knew the toy opened this?" "Elena," Mila said, "and whoever understood her warning." Mr. Alden's voice came through the doorway. "Lady Seraphine is missing. She left the chamber during the evacuation 3-minute. That did not prove she had taken Julian. It proved only that she had used the confusion to disappear." Mila stepped onto the first stone stair. A faint sound rose from below, carried through an old metal speaking tube beside the wall. One breath, then a child's frightened whisper, close enough to mean he had not been taken far. "Mila." Giovanni's eyes turned crimson. Mila gripped the railing. Somewhere beneath the hotel, Julian was waiting in the darkness, and the person who had opened the passage knew exactly whom he would call. "Do not follow the voice yet," Giovanni said. Mila stopped on the first stone step, one hand gripping the railing while Julian's faint whisper traveled through the old speaking tube beside the wall. "He called for me. That may be exactly why they left the tube open." Giovanni unfolded Elena's map beneath the emergency light. The main staircase descended toward the abandoned chapel, but 2 narrow passages split away beneath the hotel. Mr. Alden remained above with the security team, tracking their position through the building plans. 2 royal guards followed several yards behind, close enough to respond but far enough not to crowd the passage. Mila went first only because Julian had called her name, and Giovanni believed her voice might keep his son calm. He closed his eyes and listened past the machinery humming inside the walls. "His heartbeat is below us," he said. "Close. He has not reached the chapel's central chamber." They descended slowly. Giovanni marked each turn with a silver coin pressed into the stone, leaving a trail for the guards. Old lamps awakened as he passed, revealing carved crowns, roses, and lines of writing worn smooth by time. "Elena knew this place," Mila said. Giovanni's hand tightened around the map. "She died here." The words seemed to lower the temperature. 8 years ago, the chapel caught fire on the night Julian was born. I found him near the eastern entrance. Elena was behind the inner gate. His voice remained controlled, but grief moved beneath it like a second shadow. "I believe the mechanism failed." Mila remembered Lord Vale trapped behind that same gate. What if someone closed it? Giovanni looked at her, and she understood the question had lived inside him for years. At the bottom of the stairs, a trail of small footprints crossed the dust. Beside them ran the narrow marks of a woman's shoes. Julian had walked at first. He had not been carried. Giovanni touched a hidden lever beneath a carved silver rose, and a stone panel opened into a circular records room. Shelves held sealed ledgers and ceremonial boxes untouched by the hotel above. At the center stood a table bearing Elena Bellagio's crest. A letter rested beneath a clear glass cover. Giovanni raised his royal ring and the blood ward released the lock. "Only someone from your family could open this?" Mila asked. "Or someone who entered before the ward sealed again?" Giovanni removed the letter. Elena's handwriting crossed the page in careful lines. He read aloud. "There are families within the court who fear mixed blood more than war. They believe Julian's winter gift will prove that human and vampire blood can exist without corruption. I have seen the silver rose inside the household, but I do not know every person who serves it. Giovanni continued. They may try to call our son unstable. They may provoke the very power they fear and use his suffering as an argument against him. Trust no judgment built upon his terror. The warning was not a prophecy. It was a pattern Elena had recognized before her death. A second page explained that winter blood could calm unstable vampire power and help mixed blood children survive abilities that pure blood law considered impossible. Julian did not threaten the kingdom. He threatened the belief that only ancient families deserved to rule it. At the bottom of the page, Elena had written one final instruction. If I am silenced, search the memory stone beneath the altar. A quiet scrape came from the passage behind them. Giovanni moved Mila behind him before the sound finished. Lady Seraphine stood beneath the archway in a dark traveling cloak. She had followed while the blood ward remained open, using the wooden horse to prevent the outer mechanism from sealing. The toy rested in her gloved hand. Elena always believed truth would save her, Seraphine said. Giovanni's eyes turned crimson. Where is Julian? In the chamber beyond that door. Frost crept beneath the stone threshold across the room. You called him through the speaking tube, Mila said. I used a recording of your voice, Seraphine replied. He brought the horse to the wall because he believed you were waiting for him. Once the passage opened, I took the key and led him slightly, placing himself between Seraphine and Mila while listening for Julian's heartbeat. The final dose is already in his system, Seraphine said. He is exhausted, frightened, and surrounded by the place where his mother died. His body will not contain the winter gift much longer. You want him to lose control where the court can see the result, Giovanni said. I want the court to see what you refuse to accept. Seraphine placed the wooden horse into a carved recess beside the frozen door. Hidden mechanisms turned within the wall. Mila stepped closer, keeping Giovanni between her and Seraphine. Julian, she called, her voice steady. Listen to me. You are not alone. A small hand struck the other side of the door. Frost spread across the stone. Seraphine reached toward the final lever. Giovanni caught her wrist before she touched it, holding her still without striking her. You built your plan around fear, he said. Mila placed both hands against the frozen door. From the chamber beyond came Julian's uneven breathing, faster now, followed by one trembling word. Mila! Julian's frightened voice trembled through the frozen door. Mila kept both hands against the stone. I am here, she said. Listen only to me. On the other side, his breathing came too fast, each breath followed by the soft crack of ice spreading through the chamber. Giovanni held Seraphine away from the final lever and pressed his silver ring against the carved royal seal in the wall. Pale light wrapped around her wrists and ankles, locking her movement without harming her. You will remain exactly where you are, he said. Seraphine's calm expression tightened. Giovanni turned inside the carved recess. One wheel sat slightly crooked, held by the hairpin Mila had used hours earlier. I repaired that wheel, Mila said. It never turned smoothly afterward. Giovanni studied Elena's map, then the symbols around the recess. The hairpin had prevented the key from fitting completely, but it had not opened the door by itself. He placed his royal ring against a second mark and rotated the horse one careful inch. The mechanism answered with a deep click. The frozen door opened only wide enough for one person. Giovanni looked at Mila. Julian needs your voice. You enter first, but do not touch the platform or anything connected to the ritual. Mila nodded. Giovanni held the door while she slipped through the narrow gap. The chamber beyond was circular, built beneath a cracked stone dome. Julian stood at the center on a raised platform surrounded by tall silver mirrors. Frost climbed their surfaces in branching white patterns. Thin lines of pale light moved beneath his skin. He looked small inside the enormous room, his black formal coat hanging from his shoulders and his hands pressed tightly against his chest. Do not come closer, he whispered. I cannot stop it. Mila remained several feet away. You stopped it before. This is different. Then we begin differently. One breath. Nothing more. Julian shook his head. She said Mother lost control here. Your mother did not leave you warnings because she feared you. She left them because she feared the people teaching you to fear yourself. The frost continued spreading. Mila watched the light travel from Julian to the nearest mirror, then across the room into another, returning brighter each time. The chamber was not drawing new power from him. It was reflecting his panic back toward the platform. Giovanni entered behind her once the guards reached Seraphine. He remained near the doorway, far enough not to overwhelm Julian. The mirrors are creating a closed circle, Mila said. Giovanni followed the path of the light. Along the walls hung heavy black curtains embroidered with silver thread. Elena's map marked them as ceremonial barriers used to end royal rites. Those curtains were designed to block reflection, Giovanni said. He ordered the guards to release them. One by one, the heavy fabric dropped across the mirrors. Each covered surface weakened the pale light. The circle broke. Julian's breathing remained uneven, but the frost stopped advancing. Seraphine called from the outer chamber. The final dose is already in him. Covering mirrors will not change what he is. Giovanni did not look back. No, it changes what you built around him. He removed his royal ring and placed it on the stone floor between himself and Julian. No crown, no test. Only your father asking you to come home. Julian looked at the ring, his eyes filled with uncertainty. Giovanni's voice softened. I should have seen what they were doing. For distance, they used that mistake against us. Mila began counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. Julian tried to follow. The first breath broke halfway through. The second lasted longer. By the third, the light beneath his skin had begun to dim. Mila extended one open hand. You choose the next step. Julian stared at her, then at Giovanni. Slowly he stepped down from the platform. The remaining frost cracked beneath his shoes but did not spread. He crossed the chamber on unsteady legs and reached Mila first. She wrapped her server's jacket around his shoulders. Then Julian turned toward his father and lifted both arms. Giovanni crossed the final distance and gathered him carefully, holding him as if nothing in the world mattered beyond the child against his chest. Mr. Alden entered with the 2 royal guards. They secured the empty vial near the platform, Seraphine's communication device, and the wooden horse as evidence. No one touched the altar at the far end of the chamber. Beneath it, Elena's memory crystal remained sealed inside a clear stone case. Giovanni looked toward the guards. The crystal is not to be opened here. 3 neutral magistrates will witness the seal, the transfer, and the recording. Seraphine's composure finally broke. That memory belongs to the dead. Giovanni carried Julian toward the altar, Mila walking beside them. No, he said, it belongs to everyone you tried to deceive. The 3 neutral magistrates returned to the underground chapel before Elena's memory crystal was moved. Each examined the blood seal, confirmed that it had never been broken, and recorded the transfer in front of 2 independent witnesses. The senior magistrate explained that a sealed memory crystal could record only what occurred after activation and could not be altered without destroying the blood mark around its core. Giovanni did not touch it. Seraphine stood under royal restraint near the chapel entrance, guarded and silent. Julian had already been taken back to the medical suite with the physician, while Mila remained close enough for him to see her through the open doorway. The record will be opened before the council, the senior magistrate said. No private viewing, no royal privilege. Giovanni inclined his head. Agreed. The crystal was carried upstairs inside a clear security case and placed at the center of the hearing chamber. Every device was surrendered before the doors closed. Lord Vale sat apart from Seraphine. Eleanor Price and the medical records director waited under supervision. Mila stood beside the royal legal advocate, still wearing her black uniform beneath a borrowed coat. When the magistrates broke Elena's seal, Elena Bellagio appeared above the crystal inside the old chapel, one hand resting over her unborn child. Her voice was calm, but urgency lived beneath every word. She explained that she had activated the crystal before confronting Seraphine, because she believed the Silver Rose faction had entered the royal household. She had found altered succession records, hidden access to the chapel, and plans to classify mixed-blood heirs as unstable. She did not claim to know every name. She named only the person she had confronted directly. Lady Seraphine Voss. The memory shifted. Seraphine entered beneath the silver mirrors and demanded that Elena leave Giovanni and surrender any future claim for Julian. Elena refused. Seraphine warned that winter blood would prove mixed-blood heirs could survive and rule, weakening the old family's control. Then smoke appeared beyond the chapel doors. Seraphine moved to the only open exit, activated the inner gate, and ignored Elena's demand to release it. The crystal recorded Seraphine leaving while the gate remained sealed. Old architectural records, presented by Mr. Alden, confirmed there had been no second exit from that chamber. Elena's final words followed. Giovanni, do not answer grief with vengeance. Protect our son. Let truth do what anger cannot. The image faded. Giovanni stood motionless, his face whiter than stone. Seraphine lifted her. A memory can be interpreted. The senior magistrate looked toward the evidence table. Then we will consider the full chain. Mr. Alden presented the relay logs, the false identity created for Thomas Reed, the forged care reports, the stolen security routes, and the administrator access used to expose Mila's private records. Seraphine's secretary had authorized the false employee profile. 2 private guards had supplied the uniform and forged the rotation order that removed Julian's protection. The man who posed as the server had been detained near the maintenance exit and identified both accomplices. The anonymous messages, the recording of Mila's voice, and the chapel access command all came from Seraphine's device. The empty vial from the ritual chamber contained the same compound found in Julian's blood. Lord Vale admitted approving the tonic without speaking directly to the physician whose seal appeared on the request. "I believed the system," he said. "That does not excuse what I failed to question. One piece could have been challenged." Together, they formed a complete path from Seraphine's household to Julian's poisoning, abduction, and public humiliation. Giovanni did not speak as Elena's husband. He spoke as king. "My son controlled himself while every system around him was designed to make him fail." The magistrates issued an emergency judgment. Seraphine was stripped of title, council authority, and access to royal systems. She was ordered into secure confinement until a full tribunal could review every charge within 30 days. Giovanni formally removed himself from sentencing. Lord Vale was suspended from council duty and removed from the care committee for negligence. Eleanor lost authority over medical records but was not charged with conspiracy. Her testimony would continue. In the medical suite, the physician began a stabilizing treatment to stop the compound from disrupting Julian's control. A targeted antidote would be prepared from the recovered formula and administered over the following weeks. "The damage appears reversible," he said. "Recovery will take time, but there is no reason he cannot regain full control." Giovanni knelt beside Julian's bed. "Your mother told me to protect you." Julian looked at him for several quiet seconds. "You came?" Giovanni bowed his head over their joined hands. Mila stepped back, but Julian reached for her before she could leave. He placed one hand in his father's and the other in hers. For the first time that night, no one in the room expected him to prove anything. 6 months later, the Bellagio Grand opened its ballroom again. The same chandeliers burned above the same marble floor, but the silence that once ruled the room was gone. Human families stood beside vampire nobles. Mixed-blood children walked beneath the royal crest without lowering their eyes. At the center of the hall, Giovanni Bellagio placed his repaired wooden horse on the table of honor. The broken seam remained visible because he had refused to let anyone hide it. "It reminds me that broken things can still carry the truth," he told Mila. His voice was stronger now. The targeted antidote had taken 11 weeks to remove the compound from his body, followed by months of careful training with physicians who understood winter blood. He could summon frost without fear and stop it without pain. More importantly, he no longer believed his gift made him dangerous. Giovanni stood nearby in a black formal suit, his face still pale enough to seem carved from winter, but the cold distance around him had changed. He attended Julian's lessons. He reviewed every medical report himself. He asked questions before signing anything. Some evenings, father and son sat together without speaking, and the silence no longer felt like a wall. The full tribunal had begun within 30 days of Seraphine's emergency confinement and concluded 2 months before the reopening. Independent judges reviewed Elena's memory crystal, the medical evidence, the relay logs, and the testimony of every accomplice. Seraphine Voss was found guilty on every major charge and sentenced to permanent confinement in the Northern Fortress, with annual independent inspections to guarantee lawful treatment and no contact with Julian. Her secretary and private guards received separate sentences. The false server admitted that Seraphine's household had paid him and supplied his access. Lord Marcus Vale was cleared of conspiracy but permanently removed from the council for gross negligence. Eleanor Price resigned from royal administration and later joined the Reform Commission as a non-voting witness, helping expose the weaknesses she had once failed to question. No one escaped responsibility. No one was punished for a crime the evidence did not prove. Giovanni called that justice. Elena would have called it restraint. The old care committee was dissolved. In its place, Giovanni created an independent child protection office staffed by human physicians, vampire healers, legal advocates, and civilian observers. Medical reports required 2 separate verifications. No noble family could control an heir's treatment alone. Mixed-blood children received the same legal protection as pure-blood heirs. Julian's right to inherit the throne was confirmed publicly, not because he had survived a test, but because fear was no longer permitted to define fitness. The Elena Bellagio Foundation opened that evening on the hotel's lower floors, offering housing, medical care, and legal support to children rejected by either world. Mila served as civilian director alongside an experienced medical and legal board. She had refused a royal title, refused a private fortune, and refused to let Giovanni erase the loan she had taken out during her foster mother's final months. The hotel paid every hour she had worked during the crisis and provided lawful compensation after her private records were exposed. Mila negotiated her own salary, defined her authority in writing, and returned Giovanni's first contract with 3 pages of corrections. "You changed nearly every condition," he had said. "Only the unreasonable ones," she replied. Now Giovanni watched from across the ballroom as Mila knelt beside a nervous little girl wearing a hearing device. She showed the child where the quiet room was and waited until she smiled. Giovanni approached only after the family moved away. "The last time you stood in this room," he said, "you were wearing a server's jacket." Mila glanced toward Julian, who was showing the wooden horse to a group of children. "The jacket was useful. It helped save my son." Julian saved himself. "I only reminded him that he had a choice." Giovanni looked toward the boy, then back at her. "You reminded both of us." Music began near the far wall. This time no one froze when the Vampire King held out his hand. "I have spent 6 months making certain gratitude did not become obligation," he said. "So I will ask without command, promise, or crown. Will you remain in my life because you choose to?" Mila studied him. The most powerful man in the room looked less certain than he had beneath the chapel. "I will stay," she said, placing her hand in his, "but I will disagree with you often." A quiet smile touched Giovanni's face. "I have prepared for that." Julian appeared between them and took Mila's free hand. Together they crossed the ballroom, not as a perfect family and never as a replacement for Elena, but as 3 people choosing to build something honest with patience. 6 months earlier, a crying child had stood alone while an entire room watched. Now every chair was filled, every hidden truth had been named, and no child in Giovanni Bellagio's kingdom would ever again be required to suffer in silence. Mila had not defeated the darkness with magic or power. She had simply refused to look away, and even the coldest king had learned to follow the light she carried.